when what you find actually exists in these emails, what there is evidence for, what can be corroborated over and over again, and this is sourced thoroughly from financial reports, from testimony, from the actual emails that were released last week. When you paint the picture of Jeffrey Epstein's life, you see a Jewish fixer. You see a Jewish fixer that was born in America, but that dealt with every country, that dealt with the Rothschilds in continental Europe, that dealt with the British, that dealt with Ehud Barak in Israel, that dealt with the Americans, that dealt with the right and the left, that dealt with people like Ronald Lauder and people like Leon Black connected to Mark Rowan, who are supporters of Trump, but also connected to Bill Clinton, also connected to others that were boosters for the Democratic Party. Jeffrey Epstein, leveraging his connections as an in-betweener that existed in between all these spaces, had connections to the arts. Because who finances the major art museums? Jewish billionaires. Who finances the Hollywood movies? Jewish billionaires. He had connections to finance and banks, because who runs the major private equity firms, venture firms? Who runs the actual banks? Jewish billionaires. He had connections to governments, because who runs politics? Jewish billionaire donors, Jewish lawyers like Alan Dershowitz, other Jewish fixers that exist in between. This is the real story of Jeffrey Epstein. When you shed a light on these 3 million emails that came out of the DOJ, what you don't find actually is any smoking gun about ritual satanic abuse. Sorry, you might suspect that. You might have a hunch, and you might even be right. I don't think it's crazy, actually, to think that that might be going on. But what you do not have in the files, what is not in the files, is any smoking gun about that. There's actually no concrete evidence. What people have at this point in time are photos of Epstein with children that are his goddaughter. Maybe it's family friends. It's certainly nothing that's actually explicit. What you find are a handful of emails like, "I like the torture video." Concerning, but ambiguous, vague by definition. So what is not in the files is anything smoking gun about all of that. The most extraordinary maximalist claims about pedophile islands and satanic pedos and occult cabals, it just isn't in there. If it was, I'd be covering it on the show. If it was, we'd be talking about it, we'd be investigating. It's just not there. Millions and millions and millions of documents, emails, tips, pictures, videos, tons of stuff. It's not there. The evidence isn't there, and it's not corroborated. What is there are hundreds and hundreds of emails with Ronald Lauder, Leon Black, Ehud Barak, Les Wexner. What is there is what is transparent and obvious, which is that our society is clearly leveraged and manipulated and influenced by elite Jews in every sector of society, but primarily and at the top, the richest Jews. The Jewish billionaires that control the most important financial firms, and it seems that everything proceeds from their influence. Their money, which flows into the elite universities, the private schools, the Ivy Leagues, their money, which flows into the Hollywood studios and gives them cultural cachet and clout and influence. Their money, which flows into the art museums, which serves as a form of money laundering. Their money, which flows into and controls modeling agencies, which, coupled with the influence in Hollywood, provides opportunities to attractive women who can then be leveraged in themselves for further connections and influence as prostitutes. Their money, which flows into politics in the form of political donations to campaigns, which buys influence, not just in Congress, but also in the regulatory agencies, and for which there is a great deal of arbitrage. that influence in one country can actually give you leeway in another jurisdiction. Having influence in one country or influence in a nation where you can start an offshore bank account can be leveraged in a third country. And it all proceeds down from Jewish billionaires working together and deploying their capital in a strategic way. Yes, there are people that are richer. Yes, there are people that are richer than Leon Black and Les Wexner, but they are not working together, mobilizing and using and deploying their capital, using their resources for these political purposes. You don't actually need $400 billion. You need the right person in the right place. A few $100 million here and there, buying a prostitute, buying a New York City townhouse, buying an island, a donation to a university, a donation to an art museum, buying a film, having access to an actor. It is the way in which they use these things. It is the organized way, the organized manner in which Jews act as a collective, which is the source of their power. And it is always to advance Jewish interests. That is what Jeffrey Epstein represents from start to finish. He's connecting Ehud Barak to Palantir. Why? Ehud Barak is the head of Israeli military intelligence. If he has a seat on the board of Palantir, and Palantir's Gotham software is at our Social Security Administration, Treasury Department, CIA, FBI, NSA, NIH, well, we have a world of problems, don't we? And if Jeffrey Epstein is working with Ronald Lauder and working with Leon Black and working with Les Wexner, all these billionaires are supporting the war in Iraq. They're infiltrating the Trump administration to cut aid to Palestine. They're on the board of the Gaza Advisory Peace Board. Going all the way back to 1990, everywhere you see Epstein, you see a Jewish billionaire. And everywhere you see one of those Jewish billionaires, you see millions of dollars pouring into grooming Jewish leaders, advocacy for the state of Israel, and political lobbying in the U.S. government. That is the real story of Jeffrey Epstein. And that's the part that I don't see a lot of people covering. And I almost start to wonder if that is a layered conspiracy in and of itself. Because I watched Ian Carroll interview with Tucker Carlson today, and I didn't hear any mention of any of this. Ian Carroll did a Zoom interview with Tucker Carlson today, and this was supposed to be their take on the 3 million Epstein files. It was 60 minutes. And I didn't hear anything about any of this. You heard about Pizzagate and Seth Rich and Julian Assange and the Podestas, and why are they always talking about pizza, and why are they talking about hot dogs? I don't know. It's coded language. But all of that seems like a giant diversion from what is staring us in the face. 60 minutes about Seth Rich, Julian Assange, Pizzagate, which happened, by the way, 8 years ago. Pizzagate has been out there. Those WikiLeaks emails, they have been out there. They've been scrutinized. And I'm not saying we got to the bottom of it, but it's not like that's new information. This stuff about Jeffrey Epstein, this is actually there. It's not coded. It's not ambiguous. It is staring you in the face. And what it is this is the essence of organized Jewry working in America, working in society. It is transnational. It's not necessarily monolithic, but it is directed. It is focused in one direction. And there is a sense of camaraderie among them. There is a sense of identity and insularity. They talk about the outsiders as goyim. Goyim in abundance. I can't believe that there's all these goyim. Goyim don't know how to make money. That's the essence of what's going on here. And that's the part that no one wants to say out loud. Tucker says it's got nothing to do with Jews. Nothing at all. It's about the state of Israel. And it's about the particular government in Israel. No, it's not. Whether it's Ehud Barak or Netanyahu, they're part of the same thing. And whether it's Ronald Lauder or George Soros, they are in effect part of the same thing. And that thing is called world Jewry, organized Jewry. Yes, it is the Jews. No, they are not pagan gypsies. They are not Khazarians. They are not Frankists. They are not neocons. They're not just Zionists. It is organized Jewry. That is what created Jeffrey Epstein. That is what sustained Jeffrey Epstein. And that is who Jeffrey Epstein worked on behalf of. That is the story. And that's the part I don't see anybody talking about. So people have been asking me all week, you're defending him, you're covering it up. Why are you trying to refute these allegations? Because I truly believe this is a limited hangout. This is a layered conspiracy. Something did happen here. This is a revelation about how power works in America. And rather than look at what is staring you in the face, something far more spectacular and sensational is being dangled in front of you to distract you. And so everyone is using the words satanic pedophile, and no one is using the word Jewish fixer. Everyone is using those words, pedophile elites. No one is using the words Jewish billionaires. And that's what it is. What unites them together is not their love of pedophilia or their worship of Satan. What unites them is their Jewish identity. That is why when they email each other, they talk about Goyim in a pejorative way. That is why they have these deep connections to the Israeli security state. That is why, down to a man, they are participating in the pro-Israel cause politically. That's what's going on here. So that's the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. Once you put it together, it's unignorable and unavoidable that that's what he represents. So that's our show about Jeffrey Epstein. That's our expose. That is what is new in the files. Okay, so he's connected to Lauder. Think about the degrees of separation, even in this Trump administration. The head of the Development Finance Corporation is Leon Black's kid. So Jeffrey Epstein's number 2 benefactor, his son, is heading up the Development Finance Corporation. Do you know how insane that is? Jeffrey Epstein, the mastermind, the monster, his number 2 benefactor that gave him maybe upwards of $300 million altogether, his son is running the Development Finance Corporation, which is our version of Belt and Road. So we're giving money away under the auspices that it's a private sector investment. Development Finance Corporation, that's like foreign aid, but investing in private entities. Do you know who else is on the board of the Development Finance Corporation? Marco Rubio, the neocon who receives patronage from Miriam Adelson. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who is also a close personal friend of Jeffrey Epstein. So the head of the DFC, the Commerce Secretary, who is also on the board of the DFC, both 1 degree of separation from Jeff Epstein. Benjamin Black, who's the head of the DFC, writes an op-ed with Joe Lonsdale about how they're going to use the DFC. Joe Lonsdale co-founded the University of Austin, Texas with Barry Weiss. Joe Lonsdale's an investor in Barry Weiss, who became the head of CBS under Larry Ellison through Larry Ellison's connections to Trump. Okay? And Lonsdale is also the head of the Founders Fund, which is created by Peter Thiel. Lonsdale is also a founding father of Palantir, which is created by Peter Thiel, who is also connected to Jeffrey Epstein, who Jeffrey Epstein invested $40 million into. The nominee for the chairman of the Federal Reserve is the son-in-law of Ronald Lauder, who Jeffrey Epstein laundered money for by purchasing art with Leon Black, who is, again, Jeffrey Epstein's number 2 benefactor. Epstein's coordinating art purchases with Ronald Lauder, a Trump ally, again, father-in-law of Trump's Federal Reserve nominee, who has given Trump millions of dollars over the years to his campaign and super PAC, and who's also doing art deals with Leon Black, negotiated by Epstein. Ronald Lauder happens to be the chair of the World Jewish Congress and the World Economic Forum. He succeeded Edgar Bronfman Sr., who he and Ronald Lauder and Les Wexner all formed the mega group 30 years ago to push war in Iraq with Frank Luntz, roommate to Kevin McCarthy. Okay? It goes around and around and around and around. J.D. Vance, who runs for Senate, getting money from Peter Thiel, Jeff Epstein acolyte, and rumored to have had a fundraiser in Les Wexner's home. That's alleged because he comes from Ohio. It just goes around and around and around. And by the way, with Peter Thiel, when he was asked about his connections to Epstein on Joe Rogan, he pushed the lie that Epstein was a financial genius. Rogan says, what's the deal with Epstein? Peter Thiel says, well, he's a tax genius. So that's a fucking lie. It just goes around and around, and it's always Jewish. Donald Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, had jurisdiction over the prison that Epstein killed himself in 2019. And his father, a Jew, got Jeff Epstein his start at Dalton School, where he was hired and tutored the kids of Alan Greenberg at Bear Stearns, where he got his first job. Around and around, always. This is how it goes. Mark Rowan, Leon Black's partner, who's now with Jared Kushner on the Gaza Peace Board. And people want to say, it's a satanic thing, it's a pedophile thing, it's a Jewish thing. Epstein is first and foremost, before he's a pervert, before he's a occultist, before he's an eclectic, charismatic person, he is a Jew and a product of Jewry and works on behalf of Jewry and shows how Jewry operates in America, a patronage network, an intelligence network, a finance network, a political network, internationally, all rolled into one. That's what it is. And that's what the emails show. Black and white, and we have them dead to rights on this. But that's the angle that the conspiracy theorists don't want us to look at. They want us to talk about psychics and aliens and giants and time travel and cannibalism and adrenochrome and satanic ritual abuse. They want us to talk about anything other than that. It's not Jewish. Judaism has nothing to do with it. It's not about Jewish identity. It's not all Jews. It's about magic and science fiction. That in and of itself is the conspiracy. That's the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. But we're going to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say about all this.